is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
And we are back, and this is Alyssa Fuchs, and I'm here with the rant, although today it's going to be like a quickie rant. Anyways, I'm really pissed off about this. I know a lot of other people are pissed off about this. If you're pissed off about this, then you're listening to the right segment, because I'm going to tell you why. So last Sunday, while we were on the air, actually, because this started blowing up as soon as we got off the air, Republican Senator Tom Cotton revealed his open letter to the Iranian leaders, and this letter addressed the ongoing negotiations that are going on between the U.S., specifically between President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry and other world powers over limiting Iran's nuclear program in exchange for relief from the very, very strict economic sanctions. 46 other Republican senators joined this letter. This letter was disgusting, and I'm going to tell you why. This letter warned that even if Iran and the U.S. did reach an agreement, that Congress or a future president could revoke or alter the agreement, especially if the U.S.-Iran deal was not formally approved by Congress. Basically, Republicans or Congress, mad over the fact that they think that the president never consults them on anything, was like, nani poo-poo, we're going to screw up your negotiations. And that's basically what they did. In fact, not only did they threaten to screw up the negotiations, this letter could potentially start a war. And I'm not even exaggerating on that, because if Iran walks away from the table of this deal and says, you know what, we don't want to deal with you anymore because we don't trust you, then guess what? They're going to close us out of their borders. The centrifuges are probably going to start spinning, and they are going to make a nuclear bomb. And so it's really, really important that we come to an agreement with them in order to prevent them from making a nuclear bomb. You know what? For as much as I dislike Reagan once said, trust but verify. And if we want to be able to verify that they're actually complying with the limits we set out on them, we can only do that if they trust us enough to let us in the country to do inspections. They're not going to let us do that if they think that people like the Republicans are interfering in deals that they are coming to with the president. So let me give you a little more background. This letter was signed by 46 other Republican senators. It was also definitely a shot at the president himself, at his administration, at the way he approaches foreign policy, and at the way in general foreign policy is made in the U.S. The letter, as far as I'm concerned, was deliberately condescending, and its implication was clear. Republicans were threatening to sabotage any agreement that the U.S. was trying to come to with Iran because they don't like the president and they don't like the terms. So why was this letter so significant? Well, one, it was a deliberate effort by Republicans to sabotage the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. One of the biggest problems that is currently going on in the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran is trust, right? The Iranians have a large reason why they shouldn't trust us, going all the way back to the 70s. What a lot of people forget is in the 70s, the Iranians elected a leader. We did not like that leader, and we basically had that leader deposed and instituted somebody into office in their country that we as Americans liked better. That directly led to the Iranian hostage crisis during the 70s and continues to be a contentious point which creates tensions between the U.S. and Iran today. The countries don't trust each other, and Iran does not trust us, and for what I think is a good reason. Now, one of the biggest problems with this letter is that Republicans in Congress, who largely oppose the talks and have been trying to stop negotiations by imposing new sanctions on Iran. This destroys the trust even further between the two countries and forces Iran to walk away from the table, which, as I already said, could potentially start a war. This is the purpose of the letter. It was to convince Iran's leaders that Obama cannot be trusted, Obama's promises cannot be trusted, and that Republicans will do everything they can to undermine the president, and therefore the U.S. cannot be trusted to uphold its end of the bargain, and thus Iran should quit the talks, walk away from the table. Secondly, this is an unprecedented breach of protocol in how things are supposed to be done and may even be a violation of the law, which I'm going to get into in just a second. Constitutional law, Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the Constitution, which lay out which branches are responsible for taking certain actions, set strict limits and important limits on Congress's involvement in foreign policy. We once had a time back in the 17 and 1800s where individual U.S. citizens would go try and negotiate with foreign governments. This did not work out for us at all. In fact, this was a main reason why the Articles of Confederation failed and we ended up with a constitution instead. Cotton's letter that was signed by these 46 senators by interfering with the president's foreign policy went well beyond the limits of what's allowed by the Constitution and is very easily and can very easily be seen as unconstitutional. In addition, as I already mentioned, the letter also seems that it may violate a law that's known as the Logan Act. Now, this law goes back to the 1700s. It was passed because of the fact that independent citizens used to fly to other countries and attempt to negotiate with them, and it never worked out with us. And the Logan Act forbids Americans from interfering in U.S. policy. The law was originally passed when a state legislator sent a letter to France in 1798, which undermined the U.S. policy towards France. In fact, technically, violating the Logan Act is a felony, although it's highly unlikely that Tom Cotton and these 47 senators will be prosecuted under the Logan Act because, one, prosecutions under the Logan Act are very rare, and because, two, the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, would have to be the one prosecuting, or Loretta Lynch, which obviously is an even bigger problem because Loretta Lynch needs to be confirmed by the Senate. So if she was to say, yeah, I'm going to prosecute you under the Logan Act, should I get, should you approve my nomination, then there's no way they would approve her nomination. So it sets up all these other political problems. But the Logan Act at its core is meant to enforce the idea that the president is in charge of foreign policy. It's not supposed to be like domestic legislation where Obama and Congress are fighting it out. But obviously, through this letter, Republicans are trying to change that. They're trying to undermine the very premise of how U.S. foreign policy is supposed to work in this country. And the letter actually goes way beyond the articulated limits of Congress's role in foreign power, because it doesn't just undermine the Iran talks, but it undermines the very foundation of how foreign policy in the U.S. is made. By taking this extreme step, Cotton and the Cotton 47, it's almost certainly going to polarize the politics of this deal itself, and it's going to make them more partisan in their nature, which they weren't, or they sort of were, but it was a little more diffused. So what is it that Tom Cotton and other Republicans wanted by this? Well, obviously, they're opposed to any deal whatsoever between the U.S. and Iran, and we know what they want. They want to sabotage the deal because it potentially could start a war. And you may be asking yourselves, why do they want a war? Well, it all goes back to money, because a lot of the Republicans who signed that letter, they are invested in war profiteering, private corporations that make tanks and make military equipment and have contracts with the U.S. government. And so guess what? If we get involved in another war and we have to take our tax money and now use it to spend on the military, that tax money goes to private war contractors, and guess whose pockets get lined by that money? Theirs. In fact, Cotton has actually been very clear in the past that he does not want talks to fail, no matter what the terms are, because he believes the only appropriate solution to Iran's nuclear program is an outright regime change. Now, as I just mentioned, an outright regime change would almost certainly require a war, which would in turn line his pockets. Now, what's the blowback? Cotton's letter has been extremely polarizing. So far, 7 Republican senators have come out against it, saying that it went too far. In the case of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chairman Bart Carker, he warned that it could potentially backfire and make passing any new sanctions more difficult, because Democrats who were once in favor of potentially working with Republicans to pass more sanctions are now siding with the president and do not want to be involved with Republicans. And so there went the Republicans' so-called veto-proof majority that they were hoping for if they wanted to override the Iran deal. In addition, funny enough, Cotton's letter actually explained the Constitution wrong. I'm not going to go into detail about that, but it talked about how a treaty is passed, and he said that it needed to be approved by the Senate, when in fact it had to be just passed with the advice and consent of the Senate. What he wrote and how it actually works are two different things. So funny enough, he's writing a letter teaching the Iranians about the Constitution, and he gets things about the Constitution completely incorrect. Republicans are bringing these tactics in. They're using them to try and undermine the president's legislative agenda, both at home and at abroad. They're overtly sabotaging not just the Iran policy, but also this enshrined constitutional authority that the president is supposed to have. It's disrespectful, it's disingenuous, it's dangerous, and it's reckless. It's meant to embarrass the president, and it could lead to a war. So, I really hope that they're going to face a lot of political backlash, because already from both sides of the aisle, they're facing some, and I hope it only continues. I mean, this is just plain wrong.
It was wrong, and it was stupid, and even the president said, I'm embarrassed for them. I mean, it's like you said, it's nearly unprecedented. I mean, but then again, shouldn't we expect these dramatic measures, irrational moves from Republicans? I mean,
it reminds me of when Mitt Romney kept talking during that debate, and President Obama was like, please proceed off the cliff. Well, I think that's sort of where we're at now.
Yeah, just jump.
Just, continue to proceed off your cliff. We'll thank you. We'll thank you in 2016.
Please just jump.
On that note, we have
Yeah, we are going to wrap it up and say goodbye, but I want to let everyone know I'm not going to be here next Sunday because I will be waking up in Paris, God willing. I'm so excited about that. So, au revoir. But Stanley and the rest of the team will be here, so continue tuning in next Sunday.
It'll be the Heathen Show, let's
Sounds good to me.
All right.